To me, it's all about connection. Am I willing to slow down, can connect with people? The interesting thing about that is when you slow down to connect with people, you can actually start to serve them. You can start to put your arm around them, and it's not dragging people. And so this idea of really saying, all right, how do I let the world see the best of me? How do I make sure that the best of me comes out in service of others? If we can say, the greatest way that I can express love is loving myself by serving others. If I do X, Y, and Z, I'll feel fulfilled, but I can also serve others doing it. Then we move forward as opposed to being stuck behind. I think one of the biggest things that people maybe miss out on is
Well, Tyler, thanks for joining me, man.
Man, I am so glad to be here with you.
So when Maxwell first launched his leadership, his certification program and coaching platform, I found myself there like year 2. A buddy of mine had gone the first year. And so I think Chris Robinson is still involved. And so Chris and my buddy Dexter and Carrie Obenauer, all these guys were OGs. And we all stayed in the same connecting hotel room. I mean, we were like bunked up. We had beds brought in, like just 6, 7 guys, all like on this personal growth journey and looking forward at just being surrounded by people like that over the years and having those connections. We all stayed loosely connected. And so we've seen each other at different parts. And the connection point was leadership through John Maxwell, who, what is it? 100 books on leadership, 100, just the sheer energy of being around those people. When did you get connected with Maxwell, and what's that journey been? I know he also spoke at your event, did he not?
Yeah. Last summer, he spoke at my event, Impact Driven Leaders Summit. I have another one coming up here this spring in 25. So it goes back to roughly 2017. And kind of this transformation journey. At that point, I had, left my career and initially out of college. I was a nutritionist for dairy cows. I had been in the commodity consulting market kind of along with that. And my wife and I had our network marketing business. We had a gym, and I was just yearning to grow. And a lot of it is I was facing challenges in leadership like so many others face, where you're like, how do I get the best out of others, and what does leadership really mean? And so one of the things that I made as a goal is I want to find a mentor. I'd never really had like a business, I would say even a life mentor. I'd gone through different Bible study groups. I'd been around people. I had clients that it would kind of maybe mentorship, but never really someone to like, I could model myself after or like ask, hey, how do I go through this? And so I made a goal for the year to find a mentor, and had just kind of pondered on it, prayed on it, thought about it, and reached out to that point. I was listening to the Craig Rochelle leadership podcast, got a lot of information there. And he was thinking about kind of having this like circle, whatever. And so I reached out to him. It didn't come to fruition. And then my wife and I just kind of kept thinking about it, praying about it. And there ended up being this advertisement that we saw on Instagram for a John Maxwell program called the Executive Circle. And it was for CFOs, CEOs, COs, whatever with a C and an O. And I was like, let's do it. It was a pretty sizable investment, but at that point, I really wanted to grow. My wife was, interested in that too. And that started our journey relationship with Maxwell. And it quickly went from there into being involved in kind of his network marketing space, helping him write a book, going and traveling, going to Israel with him, going to Guatemala with him, and just becoming immersed into the community. And so have gotten to be good friends with people like Chris Robinson, Mark Cole. I mean, I go through the list, and what's impactful there is kind of what you said earlier, is when you start getting around people that have this leadership ethos or a value set, not even particular in, I would say leadership, but just hey, this is what, coming back to like, your life, kind of acrostic, the what's important there. That's what birthed out of me to have being impact driven, to be so much more than just, face value. What can you get for a status or an income or, accolade? It's like, no, there's more to life than necessarily just going and attain on your own. And so that all started from, again, building the relationship with John, being in those communities. And I would say today I'm grateful to be a big piece of that community because it's meant so much to my personal transformation.
Yeah, we were in the baby stages when they were first launching it, and so there was like maybe like 1,000 people, and then it turned into like 4,000 and ten
Yeah.
thousand,
Yeah.
and it just became a movement.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still give the 15 laws of personal growth to high school, college interns,
Yeah.
anybody that we come across, because it's so easy to transform your life when you start to break it down in these small little bite-sized moments. And
Yeah.
John does such a great job. Excuse me. John does such a great job of helping to make it easy to digest. And he actually, which I hear you talk about often, and something we all believe in, is authentic leadership. He's an
Yeah.
authentic leader. He's not,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
doing all the things he says he's doing. He's actually standing there and signing 400 books for people because they came out to see him speak. And I think that's the kind of thing that obviously you've had an amazing
Yeah.
window to in
Yeah.
the last couple years, huh?
It's something that's interesting. The twofold there is, I've been able to share with people that maybe haven't met him. And, John's a human. John has his idiosyncrasies. I've spent enough time closely around him to know that this is what gave me hope. And partly when he shares about not being a good leader, about when he was leading, the church in San Diego, and they got him a shirt and said, essentially, it was like, no one knows as much as I do. And he was kind of like taken aback, and he was, in his late 30s, 40s. And he was like, he talked about leadership. He spoke about it, but needed to do a better job of living it out. And, to hear someone like that, who's accomplished and is really revered to be an expert in this subject matter, that he had to transform himself, gave me like the ability to think, oh, I can do it too. And so when people ask, what's John like? I'm like, whatever you think from his books, listen to his podcast, whatever else, he's even better in person. And where I really take from that is he cares about people. He understands that people have value and are valuable. And his main thing is, how can I help that come out? One thing you'll never see John himself, talk about his investments or his homes or, whatever. Like, that's not him. In so much of our world, especially this next generation of leaders, I would say our generation that are leading organizations, we have a dichotomy. We have people that are caught up in the celebrity fanfare, the person that is, taking all the pictures on their private jet and whatever their cars and their Ferraris and their Lamborghinis, and they're doing all those things, right? And they're trying to use that as this is the signifier of success. And then you have people like John and so many others that I know that you would never know. And they are helping people. They're the quote unquote, the Jim Collins level 5 leader. They are the Maxwell pinnacle leaders, where they are helping so much great happen in and through other people that you'd actually have to go and search to find out what they're all involved in. And so when I think about that, it's like, that's impact driven, and as opposed to status driven or recognition driven. It's like, no, I want to be impact driven, where the things that happen through and because of what I do is a catalyst for so much bigger. And so coming back to that point on John, he has lived that, and it's exciting to be around, because the two things that I found is, you can have other people that are very, I don't want to say worldly driven, because that's such a churchy term, but it's this idea of possession or status or position driven. And they'll come into the Maxwell community, or they'll come into that group of people that are like, no, I don't really care. And they'll do two things. They'll never be there again, or they'll transform. And to me, that's what's been fun, is it's kind of having my own journey through it, but see others and build relationships with, people that are doing amazing things. That, a friend the other day who was the president of one of the top mortgage companies. And he and I had a conversation just hanging out as friends. And it's like, appreciates the value I can bring and vice versa. And it's like, you would never know. Like, you know it because of what his position has been, but you wouldn't know the fact that what he's accomplished because he doesn't make it about that. It's like, how can I serve you as a person? What can I do to help and connect you? Um, and again, that starts from the leader creating that as a culture and a community around them.
Isn't it isn't it interesting um, how relationship driven leaders
Oh,
are
yeah,
so impact focused.
yeah,
So, I almost feel like there's a lot of high performers that listen to this. And we say high performers because that could be mom who's working full time and coming home and doing everything at the house. It could be
yeah,
dad
yeah,
who's traveling and coming in and just feels like he's making the most of his life. But prioritizing the most important things for high performers can be challenging. When they put their priorities in the relationships of everyday life, everyday business, every human interaction, it's a great way for people. I often described early on in my career that I was laying on my back punching up at the world. And I think in reading your story and understanding your background, it was how can I go and take from the world what I should be getting because I know I can do it. I know I can
hmm
help. And it was the wrong way.
yeah,
When I transformed, it was a moment of understanding I'm here to serve. And
yeah,
the more that I transform myself into a servant leader helping others, the more attracted people
yeah,
were to the mission
yeah,
and the more impact I was actually making, to your point. But it all came from something that was always there, and
yeah,
that was building relationships with the human. It was always caring and being present and
yeah.
doing something that was great. And I read your story and kind of understand you had this bristly, maybe aggressiveness about you in the past that you've
Yeah.
now refined, like that great piece of furniture you referenced earlier, right?
Well, here's what's interesting is you were sharing that and I was thinking and I was, here's a question for you, Scott. Do you know your love language? Do you know what your number one love language is?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back and forth between physical touch and words of affirmation,
Okay.
but as Gary Chapman says,
Yeah.
all men are physical touch. So we can throw that one out and
Okay.
just say
Yeah. Yeah.
words of affirmation are
Okay.
my love language.
So for me, it's service. And what's interesting about that, and kind of like what you mentioned, like this idea of sitting down there and punching at everything. For me, it was being a bulldozer. It was being intense that I'm just going to push myself through whatever wall. And the challenge with that is you can have success doing that. And if success is meaning that you close deals, that you make money, you get promotions, you get whatever, because our world has a love affair with intense people. And we have a love affair not because it's a good relationship, because we get just enough from it that we think, oh, that's what it's about. And as you were sharing and never having really this thought and just kind of that difference, right? You sitting punching up there. Okay, great. For me, it was pushing through walls. It was very much both of them were seeking validation. Hey, am I worthwhile? Do I have value to bring? And I think the interesting piece as I think about my love language being service is I had to slow down. I had to, kind of the African proverb is one goes fast, many go far. I had to learn how to, as I've told some people this that get it, and intense people, is I had to learn how to get lazy. I had to learn how to slow down to go at the pace of others around me. And what that created was a connection, those relationships. And to me, it's all about connection. Am I willing to slow down, can connect with people? Well, the interesting thing about that is when you slow down to connect with people, you can actually start to serve them. You can start to put your arm around them and have physical touch, and it's not dragging people. And so, this idea of really saying, all right, how do I let the world see the best of me is I have to stop trying to prove whatever thing I'm trying to get through or trying to get over. And I, so often I read books and it's funny. I just went through a training last week and they were talking about the fear of rejection and the fear of failure and how we define that and what that means. And for me, it's very much rejection of not being worthy, of not having value. And as the person was going on and on and talk about how to reframe your mind and teach yourselves different things, no different than I think probably, when you had Dr. Wood on and he talked about the tip and just, all right, that's a great piece of it. but I think I heard this from him, and I very much agree. Instead of always looking for the solution, right? We could have a, say in a business, and we have say we run a plumbing business, okay? And we have a bunch of trucks on the road, and every 2 days there's a truck coming in with flat tires. And we're like, dude, why are we fixing all these flat tires? And instead of saying, all right, well, we need to go get Kevlar tires because those will hold up. And so that way we're not, we're spending twice as much, 3 times as much, and maybe they won't go as flat. It's like, hey, maybe let's actually go and say, are you driving across, nail strips? Are you, leaving, are there nails somewhere that are constantly causing these flat tires? And what I find in no difference, kind of this idea, this disconnection in relationships, we say, well, how do I need to change my mindset so I value the relationship more? Well, what if we do this? What to understand what the insecurity or the fear is that's causing us to create a barrier in relationships. And that's one of the things that I've really focused on, what I lead my community through, what I talk about in keynotes are the walls that we put up around ourselves from insecurity that make a barrier in the relationships we have, because it'll affect your kids, your spouse, anyone you work with. And to me, that's been the great transformation, is not saying, okay, how do I come to grips with myself, but understanding the insecurity that was the root of it all. And here's the amazing thing. Every single person living, breathing, walking on this earth, you can think about we'll talk about John. John has insecurities. He does. I've seen it come out. I know it. And, it's any leader has it. And it's saying, all right, if we can come to grips with our own or understand how someone else is manifesting theirs, we can enhance the relationship, build a connection, and then we can do so much more.
Yeah, it's huge. Insecurity is a really interesting topic, and it's one I know you spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
And the more you identify your own insecurities, the more self-aware you are in those moments when you need to actually activate that next level of execution. And what I mean by that is, I think just self-awareness in relationships can be very valuable. The more self-aware you are, think about marriage. How many people get married and they genuinely believe in the first couple years of their marriage that that person that they married is there to serve them? Like I feel loved this way. Why do you not do this for me? Why do you not do this for me? You used to do this for me.
Yeah.
And this language becomes the predominant conversation versus actually spending the time to connect and understand, looking at our insecurities and seeing what are we actually afraid of?
Yeah.
Are you afraid that they're going to leave? Are you afraid that they're going to not see you the same way? Are you afraid, like going through that level and actually establishing that self-awareness to love ourselves, to actually then serve the other human, changes our lives, our relationships. And I know it's been extremely impactful to you because, you talk often about how it's changed your relationships in your family, in your life, even with the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, how impactful that can be.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that people maybe miss out on is there's a difference between loving yourself and also, I would say it goes along with, if you love yourself, then you're willing to give yourself grace. And it's also accepting who and what you are. And there's a part of that the difference is saying, oh, this is who I am, deal with it. Or, oh, this is who I am. And so how do I make sure that the best of me comes out in service of others? And I think that big difference in, well, this is just who I am, Scott, deal with it mentality, which we see in people, as opposed to, okay, I understand that, when my insecurity gets pressed, I get super intense. And so if I can recognize, all right, dude, I'm getting a little intense, and say, hey, I'm sorry, excuse me, my intensity is showing, let me dial back a little bit. And that takes some tremendous vulnerability. And this is what I've learned. The leaders that are able to do that, and when I say leaders, I mean any person, whether it's everyone's a leader. The person that's willing to say, hey, excuse me, my insecurity is showing, my insecurity is being touched, ends up being way more powerful, and powerful because they become influential. Not that they usurp this tremendous control over someone, but we become influential when we connect with people. And our vulnerabilities allow us to connect, because then people can say, oh, I can see that you're human and I'm human, and we can do this together.
Yeah, it's amazing how humility still works today as a great unifier and connector,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The more someone understands that, I think a lot of times we start off with a story and maybe we're giving someone advice or guiding them on something. But something that I always try to do is I always try to come back and say, hey, listen, I want to tell you that I fail at this all the
Yeah.
time. Like I can help you with these 5 things, and I feel very confident that I can coach you through it. I can help you through it. And you know how I'm confident? Because I failed at it a bunch of times. I've seen the result. I know the right thing. I always look at Coach K, right? Coach K
Yeah.
is one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. And he wasn't one of the best basketball players of all time. But darn it, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He knew how to get the intensity out of his players. He knew how to create a brotherhood and something that's now become a movement and a legacy. Duke
Yeah.
basketball is
Yeah.
so intense and special. And he also was one heck of an X's and O's coach. And when you look at that, he obviously was able to execute, and us knowing some of our own insecurities, our own challenges can help us really take that message to a greater level. But that vulnerability does connect, doesn't it?
Well, here's another great example. You talk about Coach K, and one of my friends, Cody Foster, he just had a podcast. He wasn't able to do it, but his partner, David Callahan, had an interview with Coach K. And one of the things they talked about was like, why'd you get out of coaching? And Coach K was like, well, because I was no longer the best guy to do it. That's why. And humility to one, admit that on a podcast, the humility to understand it and know that it wasn't like this. So many others like, well, the game has passed me. It's no longer what it once was. It's like, dude, there's young coaches that are having success. It's kind of like high school coaches, and they're like, well, kids just don't do what they used to do. They're lazy. They don't want to show up. I'm like, what if I go ask the state champion? Because every single sport, there was a state champion this year. If we've had it already this year, football, if we've gone through wrestling, if you've gone through basketball, if you're in your state, there's been a state champion. And if I go ask those coaches, are they going to plan that our kids just didn't work hard enough? They didn't want to be here. They didn't want to put in the work. No, they did. That's why they were champions. And so for the coach to say, well, the game's just, I can't be that. Well, they're unwilling to go back to be, go back to that tree and sand off what they need to sand off, to hewn what they need to be. Whereas like Coach K, the example you brought up, was humble enough to understand, either I'm not willing to do the work to change, or my unique skill set does not match the necessity of what's coming. So I'm going to pass the baton to someone who has that skill set, which is such a phenomenal lesson in leadership, of understanding that sometimes it doesn't mean less of you to say, hey, I'm not the guy for the job. He is, she is, they are. Pass the baton to them. Let me go do what only I can do. Pat Lancioni talks about it in the 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? The guy who was CEO that was in the spot, the hired in new CEO, and he's kind of like, hey, I'll go back to being the head of sales because I was really good at that. And I can do that and take this demotion. And instead of being offended and, creating a coup, he's like, no, that's how I can serve the team the best. That's humble. That's humility in play.
Yeah, and John Shire's doing an amazing job and has them in probably the best position they've been in to win a championship in a long time. So Cooper Flag doesn't hurt. But
I mean, it's, somebody always says, I think Lou Holt said this. He goes, I'm a much better coach with, great players. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, that shouldn't be a great misnomer. Like, how did they get him? Well, you did the job to get him to want to be there. So kudos to you.
Yeah, great coaches attract great players.
Yeah, because they bring out the best in the player.
Right, because they need to be challenged. They also need to, the greats all have coaches. And when you look at that and you look at the development, it's really great. I also love the point you were making.
Hold on. Let's not get too far. Okay. I'm a huge JJ Redick fan. I'm a huge JJ Redick fan, not because, again, we're talking Duke basketball. That's fine. But what he has done in LA to bring out the best in some difficult personalities. even this latest thing, you go through the LeBron trade and, not LeBron trade, the Luka trade that brings him in to be with LeBron. And then you have Dalton Connect. That's like, dude, am I scum? And JJ's like, no, dude, like, you're valuable. We care about you. This is what's going to happen. And it was so funny the other night, player got hurt. And then he had told Dalton, you're probably not going to play much. And then he ends up playing 18 minutes. And it was just the ability to be that leader instead of icing him out. I don't need to talk to him. That's not my job. But to see him actually lead and have, be him, meaning getting a little fired up, but expecting from people, it's awesome to watch. He's actually on my wish list to ever have as a podcast guest because, I think his demeanor of what it means to connect and be him and bring out the most in others. He talked about that as a player one podcast. Like, man, it's no wonder he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, he's sharp and he's hip. Like, he has like that connection. It's like Shire. They're of that mold. And it goes back to the point I was going to make when Coach K saw this ability and this leadership capability from all these individuals, but because he allowed them to excel and build. So many leaders try to hold people down in their relationships. They try to be the leader by keeping themselves above, even when they start scratching and clawing their way to the point where they're just barely above. Yeah. And great leaders like Coach K develop them from both sides of the court, on the coach's bench, whether they were on the court playing. Yeah. He was developing them for the next level. And when it comes time to step away, they're ready because they were able to see it. So many other coaches can't do it.
Well, here's the thing is, and let's go back to probably someone that did it, I would say in the last half century in sports, the best was Wooden, right? And Krzyzewski's just an extension of Wooden. If you look at the sign behind you, believe it, that's directly from Wooden, right? And it's this idea where I am going to bring the best out of people. And it doesn't mean they're the guy that's going to put the ball in the basket. It doesn't mean it's going to be the person that execute the sale. It's going to be every single person that allows that to happen. The person that's in logistics to make sure that our sale goes through is just as important as the person out there on the court that is, scoring 45 a night. They are all essential. And I think, coming back to this idea of what I think Krzyzewski did well, what Wooden did really well, because Wooden taught some amazing coaches. And I think Krzyzewski has done the same. We see highly successful coaches come out of his tree. Why? Because he taught everyone to be a coach in and of themselves, to be a leader, whether they were the ones with the moniker where the captain were the leader, or if you lead from the bottom up, everyone gets better. And I think we can transform that into organizations. I had somebody the other day, they asked me, said, Tyler, there's so many books about leadership. You see, you go to the bookstore, you go on Amazon, you type in leadership, so many books about leadership. But they're like, what about a book about being a good employee? The best leadership books are those books. Because the idea to be the best employee is to be the leader, right? To start leading yourself. And where we get in trouble is when we have business owners or coaches on teams, whatever, that want everyone else to be one step below. Hey, be the employee. Don't be the leader. And so you want to have great employees, then train great leaders. Because if you train great leaders, then you're constantly going to have new people and a new crop of leaders, and you're going to be overwhelmed by it. And it's like, great, I'm the incubator. Let them go fly somewhere else. And that helps everyone, as opposed to this idea. And kind of what they were alluding to, not realizing, is I want someone to be one step below and just be happy to be one step below. And it's like, it doesn't work. Because then when you need someone to step up and lead, you've told them, well, you can only, take direction for me. You can only be my servant, instead of, no, my job as a leader is to actually serve you. And creating that cultural advancement, that's what makes organizations like Duke shine, because they've created that.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch, and it's also amazing to see how that development is exponential. You know,
Yeah.
that exponential leadership when they get to the point where they're ready to take on. See, the challenge in an organization or a company or anything is that the problems and opportunities to solve things today are not the same tomorrow. They
Mhm.
exponentially enhance. The bigger you become, the more these opportunities open up. And if you're training leaders to be one rung below you at all times, the ones that are ready are never ready for the problems you don't even know exist yet.
Yep.
But if you train them to be able to lead and take over, the minute that problem comes up, you're like, you know what, Tyler, you are amazing at this, but I think you'd be great at helping us with this problem. Do you think that you could do this?
Yeah.
And I love watching that in business. I love seeing it in sports. It's just a
Yeah.
great experience.
Well, here's the great thing about it is if the leaders you fall into I would say the ethos that I need to preserve my spot because if I get challenged, well, then I'm no longer valuable. That mindset has destroyed more cultures, more organizations, more businesses than the one it's like, hey, there's a bunch of smart people around me. My job is just to help them be in the right spot. That person has in their organizations continue to thrive and grow and innovate and just move at a monumental exponential pace because they're not the lid. And it comes back to the very central point earlier is how do we show love? And if we're showing love only that fits for us, then we're always holding everyone below us. But if we can say, the greatest way that I can express love is loving myself by serving others. And if we do that, and it's hard sometimes. You mentioned your spouse earlier. It's like, yeah, I wish they would do this for me. I wish they would recognize that. And we can get caught into that pattern of listening to our insecurities. Or we can say, hey, the best way for me to overcome that is find out what can only I do. And I can only do X, Y, and Z. If I do X, Y, and Z, I'll feel fulfilled, but I can also serve others doing it. Then we move forward as opposed to being stuck behind. It's lifting others. It's the tide rises all boats. And you just try it, hear that all the time. But the reality is if I lift others, I am going to be lifted. Period. End of story.
Yeah, the ultimate satisfaction is when you see your kids actually doing this stuff
Yeah.
and doing it better than we do.
Yeah.
You know,
Or in
like
organizations, your kids
or
in the
organizations,
organization,
yeah.
somebody you've mentored and led, and they all of a sudden start doing it. You're like, oh, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, my son read us a text. They had a new manager that came in that did all of their travel and all of their, and it was very disheveled before this guy came in. And we were sitting having lunch with my 15-year-old, and he's like, "Yeah, Dad, I sent so and so a text." And I said, "Oh, what'd you say in the text?" He said, "Can I read it to you?" I said, "Yeah, great." So he reads it to me, and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that you're going to be missed." Because the guy moved on and he took another job somewhere else. And my son goes, uh, everything was better when you got there. You organized us, you took care of us, and I'm very grateful for all the work that you put in. We're a better organization today because of you. And I'm like, I'm looking at my wife going, oh, this guy's at 15, he's
Yeah.
better than I was at 33, maybe 43.
Yeah.
And but the point is that not only are our children and our families watching, but everybody that we lead are watching us all the
Yeah.
time. So it's not just that we tell somebody to do it. It's that have they seen it modeled? Have they
Yeah.
seen the result of how
Well,
that language really helps somebody else? There was no great benefit to his organization anymore once that man left. Everybody looks at life not everybody. So many people look at life as a transaction.
yeah.
Right? They're in a moment
Yeah.
and that transaction's over. He's left, he's gone to another company, he's gone to another soccer team. What does that mean? Well, most people are going to say, "Well, good luck. I hope you have a great life.
Yeah.
Thanks." But it's the people that remember that those relationships are worth keeping,
Yeah.
worth developing, worth thanking, being grateful for. And then watch how life comes back around when you all end up in a room and you've been friends for 20 years And people don't forget those little moments, the "I believe in you" comments.
Here's something that I recognize from coaching youth sports and watching this and seeing this happen to my own kids the last couple of years is obviously between your son having the example of you, but he's also got a coach that models that. Because if he didn't have a coach that models it, then he wouldn't be willing in that community to express it. And one of the things that I realized a couple of years ago, being involved in my son's soccer team and coaching, is there was a coach that was conditioning players what to expect of their future bosses. And what he was conditioning players is don't trust, don't tell the truth, and just protect yourself, because that's how he was treating the players. If a player came to him and said, "Hey, I have a school event, I'm going to be late to practice," if he told them, he would not play on the weekend. But if someone just didn't show up to practice and he didn't know, they would play, they would start like no big deal. And so what kids soon learned, and we see this happening in workplaces now, is don't tell the truth. Because when you tell the truth, it gets held against you. Well, no different than in that case, what they learned was that the leader was insecure. And so he was always looking for him to take credit. It was always about him. He would, if a player had an opportunity to go play at a higher level, if he even thought it would not look absolutely sterling upon him and help his ego, he would never extend that opportunity to him. And so you go to these like events and these showcase events, and you see these other teams, and you're like, dude, we have half as many guys that are better, but they never got the opportunity because the coach was too afraid that if they were to go there and maybe they were just a kid who did a normal thing, like maybe he didn't make the perfect pass, that it would look bad on his ego, instead of like disconnecting that. And so one of the things to go back into your son as you share that story, and we're seeing so much in this next generation of workers that are looking for different leadership attributes, is because they have been conditioned through all of the youth activities of what to expect of leaders. And so what I just shared is they don't trust them, they don't believe them, and they have said, if I don't look out for myself, no one else will. And so as leaders, we have to recognize that. What do we need to do? We need to go focus on the relationship. We need to go, tell them uplifting things. Why do they need affirmation? No, because they've probably been told they're a POS in one way, shape, or form. You're not good enough for me, is what a lot of them have been told. They haven't been valued for what they've brought. And so when they come into the workplace, we're sitting here saying, hey, instead of going back to that guy you said earlier, it's like, man, you're great at this thing, but you know what? You'd be phenomenal, and only you can do that for the organization. They're not being told that. I see that firsthand. I have 3 kids that have been in sports. They're not. It's the rarity if that ever happens. And so in the workplace, when we think about Gen Z and this dynamic, and it's like, no, they just want to be led in good ways. And when they demand it, it's because they understand they have options. And it's the first generation that probably has had the wherewithal or enough options to go to their leaders and say, no, I'm not going to put up with your BS. I can go somewhere else. And it's really causing this major fracture in organizations, because they're like, well, we can't treat them like mushrooms and hide them in the dark and feed them BS anymore. And a lot of them are like, well, what do we do? It's like, be better. Just be a better leader. It's all good. Coming back to the state championship team, there's plenty of kids that'll work their absolute tail off. If they believe, if they trust, if they know you have the best for them, dude, they'll be as dedicated as ever because they want that connection.
Yeah, you're building a culture as a coach. To 2 points. Number one, a lot of great coaches out there, and I think my boys have been so lucky and blessed to have mostly good ones throughout their careers, which is a major, major leg up when they get to the next level. My one son playing Division I soccer, and great coaching got him there. Yes, his parents drove him everywhere and helped develop him, but he chose, and they helped support those opportunities. And it really is valuable at how impactful that can be. I mean, I still think of coaches I had growing up and the impact they made, because remember, we're at a very influential age. You're talking about having gone through this transformative moment in life and working on personal growth and attaining this level of leadership that you worked very hard for, same as most people that get there, right? They go through that
Yeah.
transformation. Well, they need it as early as possible if we can get them in a place of growing, of learning, of
Yeah.
seeing trust and
Yeah.
quality relationships. They're building a culture, and the right kind of cultures people want to be a part of. People still
Yeah.
come back to Duke basketball to this day when Duke plays
Yeah.
Carolina.
Yeah.
You know, you'll see Zion Williamson
Yeah.
and Kyrie Irving and guys that played one season there come back and watch the games and all be together as that brotherhood because they built a culture of
That's it.
all the things that you just said.
Well,
Trust,
it's a culture of
responsibility, everything.
connections. That's
Yeah.
what it is. And I think that that can't be under, I guess, emphasized in my point is like all of those things in regards to connections are what's meaningful. And that comes back to the relationship is, do you have value and are you valuable? And the more as leaders, as people, as parents that we can express that and help people really, I guess, understand and believe their value. I shared this years ago and it kind of hit me. And it was one day talking to my wife. Belief is a superpower. Belief in yourself that you can do anything and there's no holding back. Belief from someone else in you, and dude, you will change the world. And it literally is that much. If you have belief in yourself, great, you can do whatever. But the belief that you can pour into someone else, dude, it is crazy what it does. And it comes back to that connection. It comes back into, really caring about people and understanding the potential for impact. And it's not a monetary, it's not a possessional. It is really this relationship driven, because that's what really changes lives.
Yeah, it's funny. Impact is one of the four
Yeah.
parts of life for me, and I have a thing I do called the habit of daily impact, and it's
Okay.
something I established a long time ago because when you find yourself in a moment of challenge, of frustration, maybe you're having a bad day, little tiny things like we're talking about here, telling someone you
Yeah.
believe in them, saying something nice to the lady at the checkout at the
Yeah.
grocery store, holding a door for somebody, they become stackable, impactful things. A smile in the elevator instead of looking down at your phone. They sound ridiculously dumb and simple, but they're impactful. And the more you do them, they stack. And the better your day gets, the better you feel because you're giving of yourself, you're putting that positive energy out and you're flipping it. And it's a tactic that can change anybody's day, anybody's situation over seconds by just action. And it's the simplicity of sending a quick text to we had a couple kids that just made the high school soccer team. My son that went to college and is now playing. They had a state championship run last year, had an unbelievable undefeated season, lost in the semis, the states. It was tough, but big shoes to fill. A couple of kids leaving, and a lot of the younger kids, they're a little bit unsure.
Yeah.
It's new. I sent a couple of texts to the kids that made the team that I knew. I'm like, hey, looking forward to watching you play. You have the ability to change the game
Yeah.
every time you're in, or something simple, just so that someone else believes in you, because these are the things that we all need in life. Even the most important, I was going to say important, I don't mean it that way. Even the most impactful people that the John Maxwells of this is how you bring it full circle, folks, in a podcast right before you end it. Even the John Maxwells that exist in the world need to be told that someone believes in them every once in a while. It just makes them have even more superpower.
Here's the challenge is so often they're not. It's there's I've seen this in business. I've seen this as business grows. And one of the worst things I've heard from people in our organization that we try to help is, oh, I know you're really busy. Like, yes and no. I'm not as busy as you think, meaning I would love to spend time with you. How can I serve you? And I have to catch myself at times with John and have a personal relation. Text again, and it's not to say, John, it's no different than the head of any organization or whatever. There's two things. There are people that are constantly asking for stuff of them, absolutely, and there's yet a rarity of people saying, hey, thank you. Thank you for serving me. Thank you for being the example to me, and build belief in them. And just because they are human too. And it's also that we need to be reminded that just because we think that they're really important, going back to that word that you said,
Yeah.
really important, that they don't need it. Oftentimes, those are the people that need it most. And it's also, I would encourage people that are on here listening, that you're listening, and there's a little bit you need to do to just be vulnerable enough to express to your inner circle. It's like, hey, I need the encouragement too. And we all need. I have a friend that wrote a book, The Art of Encouragement, Jordan Montgomery. And it's like, how do you know when people need encouragement? They're breathing. If they're breathing, they need encouragement. And, to your other point, like one of the things you talk about being an elevator, and I love this, the idea of what's something that you can do that will change you and change someone else's life. And that's smile. One of the universal languages, I learned this several years ago. We had some business partners from Korea. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Korean. But you know what absolutely translates? A smile. You know something else that translates? A tear. Either one of those emotions, laughter, any of those things, they all translate, and you can change the connection you have with someone. Whether you understand what they're going through in life, just smile. It will break down walls. It will change lives if you just take time to smile. That's it. And it's amazing how that can open up so much more.
Yeah, it's so valuable. And so many times in leadership, people say that leadership is lonely. And when you're doing it right and you're building a great culture, it can get that way. But what makes it so much more valuable is that those thank yous, those grateful texts, those quick voice messages, they come in. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, hey, what can I do right now?
Yeah.
When you turn this off, why don't you send one of those texts to somebody?
Yeah.
Send someone, a leader that you're working with, someone that's made an impact in your life. Just send them a quick thank you, a belief in you. Send somebody something, because it will actually be exponential to
Yes.
their future, to to you feeling better. The
Yeah.
simple greedy part of that is you'll actually feel better.
Yeah.
You will feel great.
Yeah.
That's the crazy little selfish part that does work all the time. So I love that part. You're dead right about that.
Yeah. I've said this and I've learned this. I said this I spoke not too long ago. If leadership is lonely to you, you're doing it wrong. You are doing it wrong. If you feel like you're lonely, if you're alone on an island, and I've been there, then you're doing it wrong. And part of that is, what do we do to put people around us that are going to help us, lift us up? If we feel like we hold all the special little keys to the kingdom, like when I think of this, I have a mental image from the Lord of the Rings, and the little guy, the wiry guy, I don't know, I can't remember his name. He's just hoarding over the ring. If that's what you look like in leadership, then you're going to feel lonely. The greatest way to really be in leadership is throw your arms in the air, sweaty pits and all, and say, hey, I don't have the answers, but I trust in all of you. And I have this description of empathy. Empathy is putting your arms around people and walking with them. So a leader that is empathetic, that's willing to put their arms around others and walk with them, won't feel lonely. Now, are there times where you have to make decisions on your own? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's not, taken away from that. But if we feel lonely in leadership, we have created that on our own. There are elements that can be lonely, but it's seeking out those people, those mentors, those examples, those people that we can reach out to and say, hey, help me. John Shire. I don't think John Shire feels alone in leadership, because he knows any single day he can go ask Coach K, hey, I need your help. And if he feels lonely, that's on him, not because there's not a guy, a mentor that wants him to succeed and be best. And so it's kind of, that's on us. And if we feel lonely, then we have to decide to open our arms and be vulnerable and say, I don't have it all figured out. And what I have learned there is, the moment we do that, everything seems to go better and faster, because it's that vulnerability that allows connection and acceleration.
Well, the true definition of scarcity versus abundance, opening your arms up and being abundant, thinking abundantly, and not hoarding that tiny little jewel.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big, big difference. And you're making a great point there. And I think a really fun one to end on today for our listeners. Tyler, where can people find you? How can they listen to you? Let me help my audience get to you.
Yeah. So the easiest things, I'm most on YouTube. So you can search Impact Driven Leader on YouTube. Look for the guy, the yellow background, shiny bald head, as well. TylerDickerhoof.com, my website, where you can learn about the different programs, the summit, the event that I have. And then also podcasts. We just rebranded the podcast, The Tyler Dickerhoof Show. I can guarantee there's no others. So again, look that up. Would love to have you as a listener, as well as great shows like Scott's. And Scott, thank you so much for giving this opportunity to catch up with you, spend time with you, learn about you, and also pour into your audience.
Man, great conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.